Have you ever argued with someone who, no matter how much evidence you present, no matter how gently you correct them, refuses to budge even an inch? They double down, they deflect, they get angry, they twist facts, or they suddenly change the subject. You walk away exhausted, wondering, why is it so impossibly hard for some people to just say, you know what? I was wrong. Today we're diving deep into the psychology of people who hate being wrong, not just dislike, not just feel uncomfortable, but genuinely experience admitting a mistake as an existential threat. We're going to unpack where this trait comes from, what's happening in their brain and personality structure, how it shows up in relationships, work, and even society at large, and most importantly, whether these people can ever change, and how. Let's start with the core of it. Being wrong is painful for everyone, but for some, it's unbearable. When an ordinary person realizes they've made a mistake, they feel a flash of embarrassment or frustration, maybe a little ego bruise, but the brain quickly moves toward correction and learning. Neuroscientists call this the error-related negativity, a detectable brain signal that appears within 100 milliseconds of noticing a mistake. It's uncomfortable, but it's adaptive. It helps us improve. But in people who pathologically hate being wrong, that same error signal doesn't just feel bad, it feels like an attack on their entire identity.
Why?
Because their self-esteem is heavily, sometimes completely, fused with the idea of being right. Psychologists call this intellectual arrogance, or, more clinically, high need for cognitive closure, combined with fragile high self-esteem. These people don't just want to be right, they need to be seen as the one who is right. Being wrong threatens the very story they tell themselves about who they are: competent, intelligent, superior, or at the very least, not foolish. One of the strongest predictors of this trait is something called contingent self-worth. That means their feeling of worthiness as a person depends on external validation in specific domains: being smart, being morally correct, being the one who gets it. When that domain is challenged, it doesn't feel like a simple factual error. It feels like, I am worthless. Think about a child who was only praised when they got perfect grades, or who was shamed intensely for mistakes. Over time, they learn. Mistakes equals rejection, humiliation, or proof of inadequacy. The adult version of that child learns to avoid that pain at all costs, not by becoming more accurate, but by becoming defensive, evasive, and aggressively certain. Now, there are several personality traits and styles that amplify this hatred of being wrong. First, narcissism, both grandiose and vulnerable. Grandiose narcissists believe they are inherently superior, so admitting fault would shatter that illusion. Vulnerable narcissists, on the other hand, have extremely fragile self-esteem hidden behind a mask of perfectionism. Any mistake risks exposing the defective self they're terrified others will see. Second, authoritarian personality traits. People high in right-wing authoritarianism, and sometimes left-wing equivalents, tend to value certainty, order, and loyalty over nuance and self-correction. Questioning themselves feels like betrayal of the group or the ideology they've tied their identity to. Third, low tolerance for ambiguity. Some people experience uncertainty as physically distressing. Studies show they have heightened activity in the amygdala, the fear center, when faced with unclear situations. Admitting, I don't know, or I might be wrong, triggers that same alarm bell. Fourth, the Dunning-Kruger effect on steroids. Most of us know Dunning-Kruger as the idea that incompetent people overestimate their ability. But there's a darker side. Some people who are moderately competent become so threatened by the possibility of error that they cling to their first conclusion with religious fervor, refusing incoming data that contradicts it. This is where cognitive dissonance plays a huge role. When new evidence contradicts a strongly held belief, most people feel tension, that uncomfortable feeling of holding two conflicting ideas. Leon Festinger's famous theory says we're motivated to reduce that tension. Healthy people do it through updating their beliefs. Unhealthy people reduce it through denial, rationalization, or attacking the source of the new information. People who hate being wrong are masters of motivated reasoning. Their brain literally recruits rationalization pathways faster than truth-seeking ones. fMRI studies show that when partisan believers are shown evidence contradicting their political views, the emotional centers light up first, and only afterward do the reasoning areas activate. But instead of reassessing, those reasoning areas work to justify the original belief. In everyday life, this shows up in predictable patterns. Pattern 1. Deflection and whataboutism. Instead of addressing the correction, They point to someone else's worst behavior. Okay, maybe I was wrong about this fact, but you lied about something in 2012. Pattern 2. Moving the goalposts. You prove their claim wrong, and suddenly the conversation was never about facts. It was about tone, or intent, or who really cares anyway. Pattern 3. The Gish Gallop, throwing out so many half-truths and distortions that you can't possibly respond to all of them, so they declare victory by exhaustion. Pattern 4. Playing the victim. You're just attacking me because you hate me / you're closed-minded / you can't handle strong opinions. Pattern 5. Retroactive redefinition. This is my favorite. They quietly edit history so they were never actually wrong. I never said it would rain all week, I said it might rain. 3 days later, see, I told you it would rain. Now let's talk about how this trait destroys relationships. In romantic partnerships, the inability to admit fault is one of the strongest predictors of divorce, according to John Gottman's research. Why? Because every conflict becomes a war. The partner who can't say, I messed up, leaves the other person carrying 100% of the emotional repair work. Over time, resentment builds like plaque. At work, these people are the colleagues from hell. They take feedback as personal attacks. They throw juniors under the bus to save face. They kill psychological safety on teams, because if the boss or the star performer can never be wrong, everyone else learns to stay quiet, hide mistakes, and stop innovating. In friendships, they're the ones who turn every debate into a blood sport. You stop bringing up politics, religion, or even movie opinions because it's not worth the drama. And on a societal level, we're living through the consequences right now. Social media rewards certainty over accuracy. Politicians, influencers, and activists who never admit error, no matter how blatant, often rise fastest because their followers experience vicarious self-esteem through them. My side is always right becomes a drug. So is there any hope? Can someone who hates being wrong ever change? The short answer, yes, but it's hard, and it usually requires a crisis. People rarely change this trait through gentle conversation or being proven wrong more thoroughly. The ego protection is too strong. What sometimes works is a massive disruption to their identity. Losing a job because of arrogance, a partner leaving and spelling out exactly why, hitting rock bottom in some public humiliation where denial is no longer possible. Therapy can help, but only certain kinds. Regular talk therapy often fails because the person uses intellect as a defense. They out-argue the therapist. The modalities that show promise are schema therapy, which targets deep childhood beliefs like, I am only lovable if I'm perfect. Dialectical behavior therapy, DBT, which teaches tolerance of distress and uncertainty. And sometimes psychedelics-assisted therapy, because psilocybin and MDMA have been shown to temporarily lower ego defenses and increase self-compassion, making it easier to sit with the discomfort of, I was wrong. For those who don't hit a crisis and don't seek help, the prognosis is grim. They tend to become more rigid with age. The older they get, the more invested they are in the narrative that they've been right all along. But here's the hopeful part. Some people do wake up on their own. Sometimes it's becoming a parent and realizing they don't want to pass on the trait. Sometimes it's mentoring someone younger and seeing their own defensiveness reflected back in a way that's unbearable. Sometimes it's simply exhaustion. The loneliness of pushing everyone away finally outweighs the comfort of always being right. If you love someone like this, the research says don't try to win arguments. That just strengthens their defenses. Instead, model humble self-correction yourself. Say, I was wrong about that, out loud, calmly, in front of them, without shame. Over time, some of them start to see that admitting error doesn't actually cause the sky to fall. And if you recognize this trait in yourself, start small. Practice saying, I don't know, in low-stakes situations. Keep a wrongness journal. Write down one thing each day you were mistaken about, no matter how tiny. The muscle of intellectual humility is like any other. It grows with use. Being wrong is human. In fact, the fastest learners in any field, top scientists, elite athletes, master chess players, are the ones who seek out opportunities to be proven wrong because they know that's the only way to get better. The people who hate being wrong aren't stronger or smarter. They're trapped. Trapped in a cage of their own making, where growth is impossible because growth requires surrender. Real confidence isn't needing to be right. Real confidence is knowing you'll survive being wrong and come out wiser on the other side. So next time you meet someone who can't admit a mistake, no matter how small, have compassion. They're not arguing with you. They're fighting for their life. And maybe, just maybe, if we stop trying to defeat them and start modeling what it looks like to be gloriously, peacefully, humanly wrong, some of them might finally lay down their arms. Thank you for spending this time exploring the psychology of people who hate being wrong. If you recognized yourself or someone you love in this script, know that change is possible. It's never too late to choose growth over the illusion of perfection.